the economy during the Depression was encouraging people to buy homes. For the first time, the government began securing mortgages. At the federal level, this strategy might have been well-intentioned, but things got complicated when they had to determine which areas were safe for lending.
At the local level, they began to work with what were always referred to as sort of community experts. Rarely were they actually in the community, and their expertise was largely in banking and insurance and real estate development. And what they did is they divided Brooklyn up into 66 neighborhoods and assigned these neighborhoods names and grades. A was excellent, B was very good, C was caution, and then D was danger, right? And D was colored red on maps. You know, these grades were not given for things that are obvious. So a beautiful neighborhood didn't necessarily get you an A. A neighborhood with dilapidated industries didn't necessarily get you a D. But one of the most consistent ways of figuring out what grade a neighborhood was going to get was simply race and ethnicity. The reality is that any neighborhood that had 5% or more black population immediately got a D. Bedford-Stuyvesant gets a D at a time when it's about 95% white.
Over the years, I had heard people talk about redlining, but I'd never fully grasped what it meant. Neighborhoods with any black people, like Bedford-Stuyvesant and Fort Greene, were put under a kind of financial quarantine. Mortgages or even home equity loans were impossible for anybody to get.
For the 95% of Bedford-Stuyvesant residents who aren't black, what it meant was actually that they faced a choice. They could stay in their houses and watch those houses decline in value, or they could try and get out of that investment as quickly as possible and move into one of the neighborhoods that were being developed in the suburbs and in South Brooklyn under a promise of racial purity, under a promise that this would not happen to them again.
It's when I moved into East Flatbush that I started to see that the Hasidic Jewish community that I felt was well-grounded, they just started to just leave immediately. You know, it's like within a matter of 5 years, they were gone. And we couldn't understand why. I had no idea why they moved out.
By 1970, 500,000 whites had left Brooklyn. The beneficiaries of segregation were the developers who were selling them new homes. Blacks and Latinos, ineligible for loans and barred from many suburbs, were more and more concentrated in urban areas. Brooklyn became home to the largest black community in the United States.
Thousands of black people and Latinos are actually moving north into these segregated districts. They're packed into declining districts, and districts we're withdrawing the public services from. Very resources that people depend upon to sustain a kind of quality of life are actually being withdrawn. And so one of the great sort of myths, I think, of the process of ghettoization in New York and across the United States is this idea that black people and Puerto Ricans and non-white folk more generally moved into neighborhoods and destroyed them. Those neighborhoods had actually been targeted for destruction before the victims of that destruction ever arrived. But the real story is that what they did is they kept the real estate market from collapsing. They built community gardens. They created block associations. And they did all of these things that actually kept neighborhood by neighborhood, block by block, house by house, Brooklyn viable through one of the most miserable periods in the urban history of the United States. And downtown is part of that story.
Fulton Street's grand department stores started to follow their white customers to the suburbs. And downtown Brooklyn emerged as a largely African-American and Caribbean shopping district.
For me, downtown Brooklyn is just filled with all of these memories. And even now when I walk down there, I kind of see past the stores that are there, and I'm looking for Abraham and Strauss. You know, we loved Abraham and Strauss. It just seemed like, you know, you walked into a museum. There were flowers everywhere, and that woman who stood in the information booth, which was actually that big marble thing, it looked like a vase, and you just sort of stared up at her and asked her questions. We wanted to talk to her all day long. As a kid, I just remember it's where you went every year. It was back to school shopping. It was summer shopping. Every school play, this is where you went to actually get the outfit, the uniform, the costume, whatever it was. It happened downtown Brooklyn. One of our favorite restaurants was always Junior's. And so, here you have what's basically a Jewish deli, which all of a sudden is actually serving soul food.
By the 1970s, all but one of the big department stores had gone, and the flow of resources out of the city had taken its toll on downtown Brooklyn.
The first mall that opened up in Brooklyn was King Plaza. And King Plaza was in the heart of a community where people really didn't want you. More than likely, back in the 70s, you got attacked. So it became very dangerous to go out there. And, a lot of the stores kind of like made you feel unwanted. So you just got to the point where, why deal with this when I could just go 20 minutes from my house? 20 minutes in either direction, you downtown Brooklyn.
And then a new group of entrepreneurs actually found space downtown and created new businesses, new industries, new services. These were great entrepreneurs in some ways. These businesses knew how to respond to the demographic changes in their community and to continue to make a profit.
When you come here in the 80s, 1988, when I was here, nobody wanted to be downtown. We used to pay $2,500 a month. And our third to fourth month, we couldn't pay the $2,500. We went to our landlord. He so wanted his building to rent or stay rented that he knocked off $500 from the rent. So we were here when nobody wanted to be here.
These kinds of wars about space, I think, need to be dealt with a little bit more honestly. And the process of gentrifying Brooklyn is not necessarily a process of making Brooklyn a better place to live. We were supposed to learn something from our history. Last time we took millions of people across the United States, and we basically imprisoned them in small sections of cities. And we set public policy that destroyed many of their lives. And now, 40 years later, we've decided that those neighborhoods have value. And so we're in the process of distributing them and dispersing them again for the convenience of someone else.
We will now return to the public hearing relating to downtown Brooklyn.
We're hearing testimony, hearing thoughts, hearing concerns, and over the next few months, we'll make our decision.
Calendar items.
The public hearings on the downtown Brooklyn plan began with the plan's advocates presenting their case.
Good afternoon, everyone. Once approved, the development plan will generate 8,000 construction jobs and over 18,000 permanent jobs, as well as 1,000 housing units and $100 million in public infrastructure improvements.
But some business owners had seen the environmental impact statement, which projected 100 small businesses, employing 1,700 people, would be displaced by the plan. And it actually said the businesses that would be displaced are, quote, not of substantial economic value to the city, and do not contribute substantially to neighborhood character.
For many decades, Asian immigrants, as you may know, were banned from entering the U.S. And when that ban was lifted, the first place that Korean Americans settled down in and opened small stores was Fulton Mall and Church Avenue. As a matter of fact, my own family was a part of that trend. I wonder what would have happened to our American dream if we were suddenly and without notice evicted from our home and our store with little compensation.
If it could be determined that the businesses that you represent could get space at a reasonable cost in this plan, would that be acceptable?
I think that some of the owners would be willing to stay if they could get a reasonable price, but I don't see how that's likely to happen.
What are the plans, or if you know of any plan, to provide affordable business space for small businesses?
Well, one of the issues is when you add 1 million square feet of space, that provides a lot more opportunities. That's the first issue.
the fact that you said that 1 million square feet will be available, that does not necessarily mean that would be affordable.
That's right. Yeah.
So what I'm trying to ask is, what efforts are being made so that space will be affordable to small businesses?
We're going to work with each and every one of the property owners to make that happen.
2 months later, the City Planning Commission passed the plan without making any changes to protect small businesses. A month after that, it was approved by the City Council.
Where was all the discussion on affordability, on gentrification, and is there any eminent domain going to be used? We didn't even go there. We approved it, after a hearing on it and debating it. We approved it. I think I was the only one that voted against it, and I was very, very disappointed with my colleagues. We should have said no.
I wanted to find out where the downtown Brooklyn plan came from and why such drastic changes were deemed necessary in an area that was already so profitable. I decided to start at the most obvious place, the Department of City Planning.
The idea was that this area is attractive. There are these business owners willing to pay a premium to be down here in downtown Brooklyn. And yet, the range of uses that you saw there was very limited. Why could people who live and work in downtown Brooklyn not have access to a much wider range of uses? People were going outside of Brooklyn to do that kind of shopping. And there is absolutely no reason why downtown Brooklyn cannot be that more diverse, more vibrant, a place for all economic strata, a place for all racial groups, a place for every kind of business to come and locate here.
So instead of just serving a sort of predominantly maybe Black, Caribbean, lower income, like what was missing?
The range of uses. I think it's not just even that it was serving the communities, the minority communities that well. Now we are getting the area's first health food supermarket in the Torrin, which is going to serve everyone. A few years ago, you could not have attracted something like that to downtown Brooklyn. Do, minorities not deserve a better range of food options in this area, a better range of clothing options?
This didn't make any sense to me. Everybody who lived in Brooklyn knew there was a huge variety of chain stores just blocks from the Fulton Mall. Still, this idea about diversity had a lot of traction.
The challenge that we're really faced with on the Fulton Mall, number one is, it's not a race or a class challenge, but there is an issue of retail diversity. If you want to buy a cell phone, the Fulton Mall is a place where you will not be at a loss of places to go. If you want to buy a pair of sneakers.
You got it.
Joe Chan was at the center of every discussion about development downtown. City planning might have passed the plan, but Joe Chan was in charge of implementing it. A lot of people, including reporters, got confused and referred to him as a public official. In reality, he was the head of the Downtown Brooklyn Partnership, which received money from the city, as well as donations from private interests like real estate developers. I met with Joe Chan and asked him about the rationale for the Downtown Brooklyn plan.
10 years ago, not all of my friends would live in Brooklyn, and those who chose to move to Brooklyn largely for economic reasons. Today, there are very few of my friends who would not live in Brooklyn or who would not go to a bar or restaurant in Brooklyn. People are coming now because they're choosing a lifestyle, and that lifestyle being a little less mainstream, a little more creative and off the beaten path, and that's something that we've got to capitalize on. So if you think about downtown Brooklyn as morphing into an exciting 24/7 downtown place where you can come on a weeknight, there will be retail strips bustling with people sitting outdoor at cafes, people heading to night classes. That's the type of vision that we are trying to advance.
mobile phone inside today.
Right there was a John's Bargain store, and you come down there, and if you have money, you would get 2 pair of sneakers for $1.99.
Yeah, off the table.
Yeah, off the table.
Well, what's the song? Rejects to make your feet so fine. Rejects that cost $1.99.
But you can buy
Like many people, Randy Lee and Beverly Corbin, longtime community residents and activists, were caught off guard when the downtown Brooklyn plan was passed.
Hey, Sue, how you doing? Okay.
I was shocked that, you know, this plan was even devised without even taking a poll from the people in the downtown Brooklyn area who lived here, more or less than the people who shopped here.
It didn't make sense. You can't stop change. That's something we know we can't stop. But we invested a lot in this community. We built this community. They chose to revamp this place, to rezone it, and to kick us out of here, basically, you know, so they could put what they want here. Nobody asked us.
Randy and Beverly belonged to Fury, a grassroots organization that was bringing downtown Brooklyn residents together to advocate for the interests of the existing community.
This is our alternative plan here we're working on right now.
They really don't care.
Well, this is help with the fight. Show them that this is it's not going to work. We don't want that here. This is our neighborhood. We fighting to keep this.
I like to see Macy's stay.
Okay.
When I go to Manhattan, when I go to 34th Street, Macy's on 34th Street, I feel lost.
I mean, I had no problems with the movie theater over there. And it hurt my feelings when they closed them. I sure wish they make me happy and put another one in its place. I don't ask for much. Will it be?
Yeah, a bigger library, a big resource library. We can do research. The high schools are close by. The kids can go, you know, do some research.
Development isn't the be-all and end-all of life in the city. And if you ask most people in neighborhoods what they're concerned about, they're also concerned about schools, transportation, health care. They care about many things.
I think when you're going into an area or a neighborhood and you want to evoke changes, then you have to get the voice of the neighborhood.
Of the community.
Yeah, you have to get people involved. You can't just want to be doing it arbitrarily because you can.
From the intersection of Flatbush and Tillery, a new residential community is emerging. These new towers will transform Flatbush into a boulevard streaming with residents and neighborhood shops. Life along Flatbush will soon reflect the 24-hour nature of this city. Visitors will cross the Manhattan Bridge to explore an exciting world of new restaurants, hotels, and cultural venues.
3 years after the rezoning, the vision for downtown had changed dramatically. Instead of office buildings and 18,000 jobs, we were getting a forest of luxury high-rise condos. Between 2004 and 2007, developers broke ground on 19 new luxury condo and rental buildings, totaling almost 3,000 units. They felt out of scale and out of place, and they were marketed to a totally different group of people than the ones shopping in downtown Brooklyn.
What essentially happened is that the game changed. Midway through the 2000s, suddenly these office jobs weren't coming, and you saw the beginnings of the real estate bubble, a huge amount of capital ready to invest in real estate. It resulted in this shift in priorities that I think wasn't planned, but when there was money to be made, everybody wanted to make money.
When they build luxury condos, that doesn't bring jobs to the neighborhood. And let's say they did say, all right, we'll give you 25%